A group of ogre mercenaries moves stealthily through the forest. While checking for their next direction, they're ambushed by orcs, who cut them down ruthlessly. With only one surviving ogre left, he's backed to the edge of a cliff. As they tumble down, the ogre desperately slays the orcs, determined to survive. After the onslaught, the leader of the orcs emerges, calling the ogre a mere deserter who's too determined to stay alive. Defiantly, the ogre tells him he has a village and comrades to protect. Therefore he can't afford to stop. As he realizes the orc has no intention of backing out, he readies himself and attacks, but it's a futile effort and he inevitably gets slain. The ogre wakes up in an unfamiliar room, confused and disoriented. He's been treated but he doesn't recall what happened prior. After meeting Tawa, the Queen of Raja, he's told that he was found lying unconsciously by the stream and brought to safety. The ogre is humbled and he thanks her for helping him. Queen Tawa names him Iro and explains how she revived him using her magical powers, adding that his wounds were severe and they had no other way to heal him, so she'd revived him by giving him a new name. Sadly, she laments not being able to revive his other comrades. When Iro learns he's been asleep for 10 days, he recalls his goal to get to his homeland and hastily grabs his sword and hurries out, writhing and limping off. Finally energized, he begins to run, looking really intent. Then he mounts a dragon and flies away. Iro arrives at a wasteland, which used to be his homeland. He's shocked at the destruction and recalls his happy childhood memories. Angry and bent on revenge, he screams a curse at the perpetrators. In the meantime, Tawa's ministers declare their doubts as to the return of Iro, calling him an ungrateful ruffian, but just as they leave, Iro shows up in the sky, riding back to them on the dragon. Tawa, who never stopped hoping, smiles proudly. The great Rimuru, who's the leader of Tempest, and reincarnated as a slime, shares some memories of his past human life with Cheyenne. Shuna brings him tea. Later, as Shuna and Rimuru enjoy the peace and quiet, Cheyenne informs Rimuru that she's baked him some cookies that he likes. With Cheyenne known to be a bad cook, Rimuru tries to avoid the food, but she stays with him persistently. Rimuru is desperate to resist and just in time, Soai shows up to tell him about an ongoing conflict at Geld. Meanwhile, in Geld, Iro attacks an orc remnant at their construction site, driven by vengeance. When the orc remnant learns Iro has come to avenge the destruction of his home, he throws down his weapons, ready to take the onslaught. As Iro runs at him, crazed for blood, an unknown demon intervenes. Nevertheless, Iro doesn't slow down. He throws her aside and continues his insane desire for revenge. As he descends powerfully in a fearsome attack that could cut the orc in half, his friend, Benimaru, gets involved and defends the orc. Iro is confused and backs away. Benimaru is surprised to see Iro alive. He tells Iro he was wounded during the attack on their homeland, but got saved and renamed Benimaru. Iro laughs for a moment, finally relieved, then he admits he was also saved and renamed Iro. Nonetheless, Iro is confused about the ogres and orcs working together. Benimaru assures him they've reconciled and are together building a new village called Geld. Iro at first looks distrustful. His eyes ignite like he's about to attack again, but then he changes his mind and apologizes for the earlier attack. The orc is guilt-ridden and in turn, asks that they be forgiven. At the same time, Cheyenne, Shuna, and the others appear and are overwhelmed to see Iro. Later at dinner, Benimaru brags to Rimuru, who's now transformed to human, that Iro was the strongest ogre in their village and he'd had his horn broken while protecting him. He compliments that he'd been so strong he decided to work as a mercenary. Iro is humbled by their praises, but feels bad for leaving with 10 other ogres and returning with none. He says the man who hired them was in Distave, inside Demon Lord Clayman's domain, to which the others are shocked. He confesses to joining with the intention to make money, but then had heard that their homeland was about to be invaded, so he'd immediately deserted from the army, and this cost him the lives of his comrades. In an attempt to cheer him up, Cheyenne says they're happy to see him alive. Iro manages a smile though still gloomy, then he confesses he now serves Tawa, the Queen of Raja, after she saved his life and gave him a name. The Kingdom of Raja is a very small kingdom that makes its living from mining gold, but has, however, become a mere shadow of the prosperous nation it used to be. As a result, Queen Tawa has been giving her own life force to keep her kingdom and people alive, and it's slowly draining her. One day, Chiquan, Queen Tawa's doctor, warns the ministers that the mining curse will spread all over the queen if she continues to neutralize the toxins of the mines using her magic, the same way it happened with the other queens before her. The royal family has the ability to neutralize the toxins in the mines using the tiara's magic, thereby protecting the people from their poison. Nonetheless, the wearer absorbs the cursed poison upon herself. Chiquan tells Iro that the queen lost a lot of her life force because she named him and now can't seem to recover through the use of medicines or cures. The ministers are worried that they can't import enough food without mining gold, yet they can't force the queen to keep risking her life any further. When Iro suggests they cultivate the great forest of Jura, the ministers retort it as a bad idea and a means of violating a forest guarded by the storm dragon, but Iro doesn't concede. Interrupting, a soldier announces that an army from Falmouth invaded the great forest of Jura and engaged in a battle with a nation called Tempest, which completely wiped them out, adding that the storm dragon Veldora was revived after feeding on the bodies of the deceased Falmouth soldiers. The leader of Tempest, Rimuru, successfully negotiated with the newly revived dragon to prevent any more casualties outside Falmouth's army. Quickly, Iro comes up with an idea to ask for Rimuru's permission to cultivate the forest of Jura and offers to be the messenger himself, which they can no longer reject. Back in the present, as Iro concludes his explanation, he again apologizes for attacking the orc earlier. Rimuru accepts his apology and declares he became a demon lord, as he unwittingly shows off his power. Cheyenne excitedly says Rimuru defeated Clayman and earned the approval of the other demon lords. Rimuru asks the storm dragon Veldora, who's actually a person, if Iro's permission to farm in the forest of Jura can be granted. Veldora is completely nonchalant about it, so long they don't make noises. Meline materializes and queries Rimuru for not inviting him to what she calls a banquet. Rimuru assures her it's only a meeting with a messenger, but she insists since they're eating and drinking wine it must be a banquet. Finally, Iro interrupts them and humbly asks for Rimuru's help in restoring the kingdom of Raja, and though blushing, Rimuru accepts. The next day, Iro and the others leave for Raja. While flying on the dragon's back, Iro's companion has a rumbling tummy. Realizing he's hungry, Cheyenne takes out the same food she tried to force the Rimuru slime to eat it. As she opens it up, a terrible stench from the food covers the atmosphere and chokes the dragon, sending it unconscious and descending through the clouds. However, before hitting the water, Rimuru shows up just in time and nudges the dragon awake. After arriving at Raja, Iro introduces the ministers to Rimuru. A minister naively asks Rimuru if he's really a slime as he's heard, so to prove him right, Rimuru transforms into a slime. The minister is stunned and hastily asks him to return to looking human, to which he obliges. Iro explains to the ministers that the storm dragon Veldora has granted them permission to cultivate the forest of Jura. The councilmen are surprised, yet worried that a large-scale cultivation effort will require the aid of specialists, of which they have but a few. Unexpectedly though, they hear a voice from an invincible lady telling them not to worry. As she manifests with other spirits, they discover she's Traini, a dryad that dwells in the Jura forest. The queen of spirits and demon lord, the great Ramiris, jealously intrudes. When they're having a hard time discerning who she is, she commands Rimuru to introduce her. After Rimuru introduces her as a demon lord, the councilmen stutter an apology. Just then, Chiquan enters the room and announces that Queen Tawa has awakened. In Queen Tawa's private room, the queen apologizes for having to sit while attending to them, then she begins to cough, obviously still quite sick. Iro assures her she can be healed by Rimuru. After she accepts, Rimuru admits to sensing enormous power in her tiara. While attempting to heal her, he learns that the tiara's curse poison can't be removed, except by the person who placed the curse. However, she'd eventually recover if she stops using the power in the tiara and eats honey often. Soon, Queen Tawa is given honey and immediately begins to feel better. She explains why using her tiara to help her people is a tough decision she can't overlook, but Rimuru assures her he'll take care of the poisons. Soon after they arrive at the lake where poisons from the mines have been sipping into. Queen Tawa tells them the lake was once filled with clean water, but has now become a lake of eternal sleep. Eventually, the poison will become so terrible that the air around it will be toxic. Rimuru is undaunted, as he intends to make the lake pure again. He recalls the time he nudged the unconscious dragon back to life, how he'd gotten his hand wet and had felt an unnatural poison in it. Convinced that the poison in the lake isn't from the gold mines, he wanders into the water, and commanding it apart with great power, he finds a powerful magic circle, the poison source, and destroys it. After the purification, new water fills up the lake again, to the queen's delight. Later that night, the people of Raja celebrate the new water. On the other hand, Benimaru ponders how the magic ring got into the lake. Rimuru is clueless and considers it could have been made by the same person who put the curse poison on the tiara. He suggests they'll have to find the person to be sure. Iro interrupts, thanking Rimuru over again. Nonetheless, Rimuru insists he's not done yet. He says he was touched to learn that Queen Tawa has been sacrificing her life and health for her country and people, and as a result, he's been inspired to be just as reliable and wishes to continue offering his support. As Iro stutters for words, Cheyenne jumps at him drunkenly. Queen Tawa sits gloomily in her room. When Rimuru visits her, she admits to envying him. She's observed he's a free-spirited leader who spends time with his companions. Sadly, she confesses saving Iro because she believed he'd be dedicated to her, the same way he was dedicated to his comrades and homeland, but now feels bad and considers her actions selfish. While attempting to pacify her, Rimuru assures her it's alright to be selfish sometimes. Besides, he considers her intentions a good one since she hasn't commanded Iro to stand by her side forever. He asks her to lighten up her mood and not let herself get weighed down by her sense of responsibility. A strange man arrives at the forest of Jura to find it being cultivated by the people of Raja. He's upset and confused, especially at the realization that the lake has been cleansed and Queen Tawa is back to good health. Having had a hand in the distortion of Raja, this strange man whose name is Lakua, looks like he's living his worst nightmare. After coming across Minister Mabuji, he pretends to be fine and declares bringing great goods with him. Afterward, he ponders on a way to bring great chaos and destruction to Raja. Iro visits the gravesite of his slain comrades, apologizing for letting himself get carried away about making money that he failed to lead them right. He can't help but feel responsible for their passing. Benimaru joins him and pays his respects. Iro, who's still disappointed, continues to blame himself for not being good and strong enough to protect them, and he is ashamed that they gave their lives for him. Then determined, he swears to give his life next time to protect his comrades. Benimaru reminds him he won't have to be alone again. Abruptly, a messenger flies to them on a dragon, informing Iro that Queen Tawa has become sick again. The lake was suddenly found to become so heavily poisoned again that the air had become toxic. Queen Tawa, in an attempt to save her people, had used the tiara and had become terribly sick. At the same time, Slime Rimuru is informed about the news of the queen. He's confused about the suddenness of it, having completely purified the water. Moreover, when he learns that the army of a neighboring nation is moving to attack Raja, he's convinced that it's no mere coincidence. Then he starts to suspect that Chiquan might not be offering Queen Tawa much treatment after all. Quickly, he summons Soai and his team and asks that they discover why the kingdom of Raja is being targeted. At the same time, Chiquan tells the minister that they can't relocate Queen Tawa due to her current state. He's convinced she won't survive for long if she goes on the run. Queen Tawa lies really sick in her bed. Convinced she might not survive, she apologizes to Iro for failing to help his comrades and tells him he's free to go wherever he wants, but Iro refuses to leave. Subsequently, Rimuru informs his subordinates that he intends to take Tawa's side in the war, although he's not entirely sure who could be responsible for the manipulations. Willingly, they all agree to support him. Diablo assures Rimuru that he can find the person who created the curse poison in the tiara and a magic ring in the lake and wishes to negotiate with them to have the curse undone. Rimuru is excited to hear this and immediately grants him his permission. Iro is extremely worried about Queen Tawa. He thinks it's suspicious that every time the lake is reported to be poisoned, the queen heals it with the tiara's power. He's uncertain, but he considers something to be responsible for it. Lakua, who's been hiding in the shadows, summons him for a private meeting he claims can save the life of the queen. Iro is immediately interested, having been desperate for a solution. Lakua tells him about a secret art that involves transferring one's soul into another's body. As he sees the interest and desire in Iro, he teases him that the process involves some degree of compatibility, adding that since his soul and the queen's are linked by the ritual of being named by her, it's sure to work. He further explains that if the queen's soul were to be transferred into his body, his soul will wander around without anybody to get into and inevitably become lost. Iro doesn't think much about it and quickly accepts for the process to begin. He's been seeking a way to repay the queen and believes he's finally found the chance. Later, Lakua shows Iro a curse orb, renowned for possessing secret powers. Lakua claims it can rebuild a body to be much stronger than it ever was, and asks Iro to swallow it for the soul exchanging process. Naively, Iro swallows it and burns it with a mysterious power. Soon, he follows Lakua through a dark alley with the unconscious queen in his arms. Rimuru and his subordinates appear at Raja and are informed that the queen and Iro are missing. Subsequently, Lakua commands Iro to lay the queen on a mysterious altar and he naively does. At the same time, Rimuru and the others trail their scent. Rimuru is informed by Soai that the neighboring country is after a large gold vein resting underneath Raja and is hastily preparing to attack so they can claim it. Nonetheless, the councilmen claim the gold are no longer what it used to be. When they resume the trail, Rimuru asks the ministers to assemble his men and evacuate the civilians at once, promising to help them when the war begins. When Queen Tawa finally comes awake, Lakua tells her they intend to transfer her soul into Iro's body. She goes against the idea and tries to get up, but she's too weak. She asks Iro to live for himself and for his fallen comrades, before she passes out again. Iro's mind is unchanged. He commands the ritual process commences at once. However, Lacua begins to laugh at him and applauds his naivety. He admits that when his initial plans were sabotaged by Rimuru, he was anxious and afraid. Nevertheless, his plan turned out perfect. As he moves around in circles, celebrating, he declares his queen will be so pleased with him. When Iro asks about the ritual, Lacua mocks him with a scornful laugh. There was never a ritual to exchange Queen Tawa's soul with Iro's body. Lacua says the curse orb Iro swallowed though, is indeed a secret power that's guaranteed to compel Queen Tawa to use the magic of the tiara one more time and lose the rest of her life force. Iro has heard enough and charges at Lacua, ready to split him in half, but Lacua only gets more excited. He says the rage in Iro is the power that'll ignite the orb. Then, as Iro runs at him furiously, Lacua commands the curse orb to burst and it ignites inside of him, transforming him into an otherworldly creature. To further increase Iro's rage, Lacua reminds him about his slain brothers and the destruction of his homeland, which sends him into a complete rampage and destruction. As Queen Tawa pitifully watches the destruction, Lacua persuades her to help Iro, knowing very well that it'll lead to her eternal sleep. Queen Tawa can't bear to watch Iro suffer. As she musters the tiara's power, the ground suddenly crumbles and she falls through, but Rimuru rescues her before she hits the rubble. Shuna creates a shield while Benimaru fights Iro. Lacua curses Rimuru for getting involved, then he throws a smoke bomb and stupidly runs off. Rimuru goes after him, riding on his wolf. Lacua desperately shoots laser balls at him, but he evades them easily. Soai informs Rimuru that the neighboring country's army has begun to march on Raja's borders. Rimuru instructs his subordinates to keep the losses to a minimum and should avoid slaying anyone, unless necessary. Diablo visits Violet, an ancient demon in a spirit realm. He tells her he's reincarnated and has been named Diablo. Violet is jealous. When she demands to know why he's come, Diablo asks if she placed a magic circle in the lake of Raja Kingdom, to which she denies. Diablo though is unconvinced. He promises to tell her why he's interested in Raja, she'll stay away from the kingdom. When she declines, Diablo grows suspicious. Violet tells him the story of the tiara from centuries ago, how the queen at the time had desired the power to save her kingdom and had, as a result, been given the tiara, which possessed immense magical power that will refill itself if used up. However, in exchange for the tiara, a curse is placed on whoever uses it. A curse that's bound to be genetic and will pass on to future generations. The greater the wish, the deeper the curse poison will eat into the user. After the queen at the time had willingly agreed, Violet had explained that by constantly using the tiara, the user would be stained by the color of her magic, and that when it happens she'll obtain the user's body to serve as her host, allowing her manifest herself in the real world. However, if that never happens then the tiara will get passed on from one generation to the next. Diablo understands her motives. In order for Queen Tawa to keep using the power in the tiara, Violet had commanded Lacua to create problems in her kingdom so she'd have no other choice but to keep tapping into the tiara's power while slowly losing her own. Diablo asks her to leave Queen Tawa alone and in return, he'll hide her wrongdoings from everyone. When Violet refuses, they have a face-off and swing into an attack. When Violet's attacks on Diablo prove futile, she takes a moment to hide, then she strikes again with a powerful web that tangles Diablo up. While laughing to victory, Diablo effortlessly breaks free. Having used up so much power, Violet's temporary body made from magicules begins to fall apart. Just then, two other ancient demons show up to stop the fight. They announce that Lacua has taken matters into his own hands and has caused a war to break out between the kingdom of Raja and a neighboring country, as a result of false information he instigated. They add that he's done something to the queen's body, other than the curse poison, which dents the agreement between Violet and the queen from centuries ago. Finally, Violet agrees to forego the tiara's curse poison. While walking away, she curiously asks Diablo who named him, to which he proudly tells her, the great Rimuru. Meanwhile, Benimaru and Iro continue to fight. Iro shows no sign of relenting. As Rimuru chases after Lacua, Lacua hurls a laser bomb that explodes and causes a distraction, splitting them up in different tracks. When Lacua's track sends him descending into a volcano lava, he reveals himself to be a demon and flies out. Shuna and Queen Tawa make it out of the cave. While trying to get to safety, Benimaru and Iro appear in front of them, still fighting. When their destruction causes a rock demolition, Iro instinctively fires off a threat on the queen. When it looks like the real Iro might be re-emerging, he suddenly develops new powers and takes off, causing more destruction. At the same time, Chikon joins Lacua for support. Rimuru isn't surprised though. Rimuru's wolf offers to challenge Chikon. As it charges at him, Chikon shoots fireballs at him, but the wolf commands a powerful wind that engulfs him and blows him up with his own fireballs. Lacua draws his weapon and attacks Rimuru, but it's a futile effort. With the fight quickly looking over, Violet manifests to Lacua, telling him he's done more than she asked, as he was merely meant to observe the queen. Lacua remains convinced he did the right thing, but Violet tags him as an unfaithful servant and abandons him. Cornered and desperate, Lacua swallows a cursed orb and grows into immense power, intending to cause a great explosion. Nonetheless, before the explosion, Rimuru devours it with his own power and it completely vanishes. After realizing the army leaders have been replaced by Lacua's subordinates, Rimuru finally directs that they be slain. Benimaru, on the other hand, can't seem to put down Iroh. As Iroh comes flying at him, Queen Tawa gets in the way. Iroh freezes, overpowered by his desire to save her, then backing away in a haze, he thrusts his own heart and pulls out the cursed orb. Finally returning to himself, Iroh compliments Benimaru for being strong, as he begins to desiccate, the repercussion of the cursed orb. After total desiccation, Queen Tawa summons the power of the tiara and wishes Iroh back to life, and immediately, he begins to reform. Shortly after, the tiara disintegrates, and Queen Tawa, having used all her life force, also vanishes. In the process of her transition, Violet apologizes for Lacua's interference and returns Queen Tawa back to life, much to Iroh's delight. At the conclusion, they hold a new feast in Raja to celebrate their victory. Rimuru offers to buy iron ore, which was discovered in a cave during Benimaru and Iroh's battle, in admiration of Queen Tawa, who sacrificed her life to bring Iroh back to life. After getting the approval of his subordinates, Rimuru raises his glass to the future of Raja and Tempest.